Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is long overdue because we moved from Hawaii about 2.5 months ago, but we didn't get our stuff delivered until last week. So I've been waiting until our stuff got here, the move was completely done and over with before I made this video so I could talk about the process from beginning to end. And when we moved off the island, a good amount of people were curious as to some of the logistics and how we did make such a big move. I also made a video about 2 years ago when we moved to Hawaii, so if you're interested in that process, I go through it pretty in depth in that video, so I'll have that linked below, and I'll talk a little bit about moving to the island and off the island in this video as well. I do have my notes pulled up so I can make sure I talk about everything and address all of the questions that I was asked. So I'm going to be talking about how we moved our stuff, how we moved my car, how we moved our cat, and basically any pros and cons of living in Hawaii, if there's anything that we regret, if we liked where we lived, all that great stuff, and basically any recommendations I would make if you are in that process right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is how we moved our stuff. Basically, we downsized a lot. We didn't move any furniture. And we did it that way because when you ship things off of the island, you are charged by weight. So the less stuff you have, the less it weighs, ultimately the less you're spending on it. We did get a couple different quotes from a few different places. Ultimately, we went with Island Movers, and what they do is you have to have at least 500 pounds of stuff to move, and 500 pounds starts at like a certain price, and then from there, the more weight that you ship, then you are charged more per pound. So what that process looks like is they actually send somebody to your place to basically get a feel for how much stuff you're going to be shipping, and they give you an estimated weight based off of what you show them, and from that weight, you will get a quote like, okay, I showed you the living room, this is all we're bringing. Okay, we're going to go off of some estimates, and this is how much we think it's going to weigh, which means this is how much we think it's going to cost. So once you get the quote, you will then pay a certain percentage of that quote, and once everything is said and done, they come in, they pack it for you, they put it on the truck, they bring it to the port, they weigh it down at the port. Once it's finally weighed and they get that final weight, then you are either charged more because their estimate wasn't high enough, or you are then refunded the difference if it ended up being less than what they thought. So Island Movers, I believe their minimum was 500 pounds. We did our best to be as close to 500 pounds as humanly possible. We obviously couldn't weigh everything, but we just did our best to guess. It ended up being 680 pounds, so I'm honestly surprised it was that much because it really wasn't that much stuff. It's so crazy how much things add up. But if you are shipping things to or from the island, you can expect to pay a couple $1,000s for not a lot of stuff. It will add up very quickly. So overall, it took about 10 weeks for our stuff to get here. Now, we were expecting our stuff to come around the time that it did, and we hadn't heard anything, so Matt called and he was basically like, is there an update? We haven't heard anything. And she said, let me check. And the next day she's like, yeah, we have your boxes here, when can we deliver? And they delivered it the next day. So it makes you wonder, like, were they going to call anyway and set up the delivery, or was it because we called? So I don't know how long they actually had our stuff there. If they had it sitting there for a week or two, I couldn't tell you that. But if you are feeling like it's taking a long time, just don't hesitate to call them and ask for an update and see where things are at. If you are able to downsize enough to where you can just pack everything into your luggage, I would definitely recommend doing it that way. I mean, it's obviously going to be much more cost effective, and you're just moving less stuff, it's less hassle. But if you have a lot of things that are sentimental or that you don't want to get rid of, then you're kind of crossing the threshold of doing a small shipment, which is like what happened to us. If I could do it, I would have done it the way that my sister did it when she moved to the island. She literally had 2 giant duffel bags of all her stuff, and her cats in a backpack. But I'll put a picture of all the luggage that we did take with us on our plane ride to Florida. You just have to make sure that your luggage doesn't exceed a certain amount of weight. Definitely depends on the airline, but that's the stuff that we took. And then we had 680 pounds in a shipment. So that's how we got our stuff over to Florida. And it was much different than when we moved to Hawaii, because luckily Matt was being discharged from the military. So when you are getting out of the military, they will help you move back home and you can pick like where you want to ship things. So they helped a lot with organizing that and obviously the cost of that as well. So we were like, just ship everything. So that's how we got our stuff here. So we went with Island Movers, a couple $1,000s. We didn't have any issues other than we probably should have called earlier for an update to see if our stuff got here. It took about 10 weeks. Overall went really smooth. They pack everything up for you. And actually, when the stuff gets here, it's not Island Movers anymore. They have like a mainland company that I'm sure they hand things off to. I wonder what the name of the company was that took over. So my forms say Berger Transfer and Storage Incorporated. I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere it was called like Ocean to Ocean Shipments. But yeah, they'll hand off all the stuff to another company who will then deliver it. And they brought the truck in and the guys brought the boxes in for me, so I didn't have to like lift anything. Okay, so that's how we got our stuff here. Next thing I want to talk about is getting my car here. So we actually used the exact same company that we used to get my car to Hawaii from Texas. It's Hawaii Car Transport, and we actually did the exact same thing in a sense when we moved there that we did when we moved off. So we sold Matt's Jeep right before we moved. At the time, the market for used cars was actually really insane. We sold his Jeep within 24 hours of posting about it, and then we flew out a week later. So it all worked out very nicely. And that was that. So we did sell his car, and then we shipped my car with Hawaii Car Transport. And they do two different options. So the first one is you can ship it just from port to port, or you can ship it like to an address, like have it delivered to an address. And I've now done it both ways. When we moved to Hawaii, we lived in super west Texas, El Paso. So we lived close enough where it was realistic for us to drive my car to San Diego. They have a San Diego port. We dropped it off there and they shipped it port to port to Hawaii. So obviously Hawaii is not very big. You can easily drive to the port there and pick it up. This time though, we were like, do we do the port to port? So it would then go from Hawaii to one of the West Coast ports. And we had played with the idea because we're like, okay, we can just ship it to California and then maybe we can fly there, pick up the car, drive it cross country to Florida, and that be it. But going through like the cost of that trip and the time it would take to do it, there really wasn't that big of a difference, maybe just a couple $100s. But then that's not considering like the time that you would have to spend doing that of 3 or 4 days. Matt would have to miss some work. So it just overall didn't make a significant difference for us. So we decided to have it shipped to our place. And honestly, delivery went really smooth. I haven't had any issues with it either way. There's no damage to my car. They're super nice. But because we moved to Florida without Matt's car and we were waiting on my car to arrive from the shipment, we didn't have a car for the first few days, which we were lucky where my parents do live here, so we were able to borrow their car for a few days. But we did buy Matt a car like within the first few days. That was one of the first things that we did. But if my parents weren't here, we would have to get a rental. So that's how the logistics of that would have worked out. But that's just what happened in our situation. And timeline wise, it took my car 1 day short of 2 weeks to make it from Hawaii to Florida, which I think is insane considering it went across the ocean and then across the only thing that I learned through the process of shipping my car twice now is If you do not have your car title, like just make sure you have it. And I know that seems like common sense, but I did lose my car title in Texas, and I learned that you actually don't need a car title to ship vehicles to the island, which was fine since I didn't have mine, I lost it. But you do need the car title to take a vehicle off of the island, so I did have to get it replaced. That's just the only hiccup that I had in the process. But other than that, it was really smooth, it came really quickly. The cost difference is quite significant. It is about $1,000 more expensive to have it shipped to an address and delivered to you compared to you going to the port yourself and picking it up there. So if you live within like 10 hours of one of the West Coast ports, I would definitely recommend just going and pick it up yourself. All right, the next thing to talk about is Milo, our little cat. So moving with your pet in general. It is so much easier to move your pet off of the island than it is to move your pet to Hawaii, and let me tell you that. I talked about this process in so much detail in my moving to Hawaii video, but to sum it up, Hawaii is a rabies-free island. I believe they're tick and flea free as well. So you have to go through a very extensive and thorough vaccination and blood testing process before you take your pet to the island, and it's very time sensitive, very time specific. So definitely if you're thinking about moving to Hawaii and you have a pet, you have to go check out I believe it's the Hawaii Department of Agriculture website. They have all the information there. Definitely look at that and make sure that you have enough time to do all that before you are moving to Hawaii. Overall, the process of moving your pet to Hawaii is more expensive. I believe like all the vaccinations, vet appointments he had, the blood tests, the paperwork, the fees, the airplane, like everything together, I believe was around $700 to bring Milo to Hawaii. Bringing him off of the island, because we moved to Florida. Florida doesn't have any restrictions in terms of pets. We didn't have to do anything. The only thing that you have to make sure you do when you are traveling in an airplane with a pet is that the airplane approves you having your pet in the cabin if that's what you want to do, and call ahead of time to make sure that you can reserve a spot for your pet. There is a pet fee that you have to pay. We've only flown with Alaskan Airlines with Milo. We haven't had any issues with them, so we just kind of stick to them. It's $100 to add the pet to your itinerary and your trip as a whole. We took 2 flights from Hawaii to Florida. It wasn't $100 each flight, it was just $100 for the entire trip. But you do have to call and make sure you reserve a spot because they can only have so many pets on each flight. And you do pay that fee when you check in for the flight the day of. So you don't pay it like when you make the reservation, it's the day of your flight that you would then pay for that. So $100 is much better than $700 and the stress of making sure all the paperwork is completed. I think that really sums up the entire move. We got our stuff here, we got my car here, and we got our pet here. We got ourselves here. I know it's intimidating to think about like moving to an island and moving off the island. It must be such a complicated process, but honestly, just don't overthink it. You have to get your stuff off somehow. You have to decide what to do with your cars, and you have to decide how to get yourself and if you have a pet off the island. So just try breaking it down into small little bite-sized pieces. But overall, I just wanted to talk about my experience, like living on Hawaii, pros and cons, things like that. I would say like the biggest cons is just sometimes because you're on an island. I believe Hawaii is actually the furthest island in the world from a mainland, if that makes sense. Like distance-wise, like Hawaii really is so far away from any good chunk of land. Sometimes you can just feel very isolated and really far away with what everything else is going on in the world. So feeling kind of isolated and like that homesick feeling did happen to me a little bit, especially when tourism started to pick back up and there were more people coming to the island, and more people, it's more crowded, and you just feel like you can't get off the island. Like there's so many people and you're like stuck there. So it's kind of a lot sometimes, but it wasn't like that every day. Another thing that wasn't a con for me when I was there, but like now that I think about it, it just has to do with mail. Like when you order something, it's going to take a lot longer to get there than it does here. And I honestly didn't even notice that until we got to Florida, and things that I'm ordering are coming like the next day, next couple days. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize how long it took for things to get to Hawaii when I was there. Overall, there's just so many pros. Obviously the island's beautiful. There's so many things to do, and along with there being so many things to do, I guess you could say there's a con where obviously there's a lot of free things that you can do, but there's a lot of really cool things that do cost money that you can do. So if you're going and you're trying to experience all these things, just budget accordingly and be prepared for that. Especially if there's a lot of restaurants you want to try. But honestly, I loved where we lived. We had a great landlord. I loved my job. I loved our lifestyle. It was just so nice. I honestly really miss it. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I tell Matt quite often, like, I miss living in Hawaii. It was just a lot of fun. I don't know. But there's really nothing that I regret about our decision to move there temporarily. I would say though that if you are moving a lot of stuff there, definitely make it worth your effort, because it can be a lot. So if you can't just do a couple duffel bags and a carry-on and you're making like a significant move, then maybe try to be there for a couple years. I'm glad that we stayed the extra year, because it is a lot of work to get things on and off the island. It's expensive to do that, so just like think about making it worth your while. If you are planning on making a move to Hawaii and you're not sure of like the area of the island that you want to move to or live in, definitely look on YouTube and see if you can find videos showing you different areas of the island, like Hawaii Kai, Kailua, Ewa Beach. You can look in town like Waikiki, North Shore, Mililani. Like, you can look at videos and see what there's going on in all these different areas, see what you like. Considering we didn't really know where we wanted to live, I think it worked out really well. And obviously, out of respect for my landlord's privacy, because we rented a floor of her house, I'm not going to share like exactly where we lived. But I will say it was more of like the Hawaii Kai side of the island. So the proximity to town was really great. The commute to work was kind of far. I worked in Ewa Beach, but with 3 of us working in different areas of the island, I felt it was a fairly central place where we all had similar commutes. So, but the Hawaii Kai area, I think it's just really great because, again, the proximity to town, Waikiki, Honolulu, but then it's on like the eastern side of the island, and I personally liked the east side beaches, going up to Kailua, Lani Kai, Bellows Beach. I just really liked it. If I had to live elsewhere on the island, I probably would have looked into Ewa Beach just because I worked over there. It seemed like a great area. It's very similar proximity-wise to town. It's just on the opposite side of the island, so you would be closer to like the west side beaches. I think Kailua is also a great area. My sister's actually moving there right now since we left, and she's staying a little bit longer. Again, I just love the east side. I didn't spend too much time on the North Shore, but if you work somewhere fairly close or you don't mind commuting, then I think that could be a really great place to be. The pipeline is up there. Super cute, like islandy feel. But if you're looking for somewhere to stay, definitely don't overlook renting out part of somebody's house. A lot of people do that. That's what we did, and it's actually what my sister's doing again now that she's like on her own. When we were looking for somewhere to live when we moved there, all we did was look on Zillow at rentals. I don't really think we looked at any apartments. Again, that was just because we had 3 cats, we needed 3 parking spaces, we wanted laundry in the unit, and we didn't really want to be in the heart of town because of like traffic and just being really like close to everything. I just didn't like how that felt. So super happy with our landlord and the house that we rented. Definitely look into that if you are considering moving there. And if you're interested in seeing more of the space we lived in. I did film like a Hawaii house tour video. I'll link that below if you just want to see the unit. Overall, I'm super happy that we spent our 2 years there. I was so sad to leave, but at the end of the day, we didn't have any family there, and I think if that's something that's important to you, then it can definitely be a deal breaker on whether or not you stay on the island for good. And coming up on the 2-year mark for us, we were kind of like, what are we gonna do? And then we got pregnant and we're like, okay, it's a really expensive and really long plane ride to get from Hawaii to visit family, so we just decided to make the move back. But we have so many great memories. I'm so happy that we did it. If you have any questions about the process that I didn't answer, definitely leave them in a comment below and I'd be happy to answer. But other than that, guys, I think that's it. I'm so happy the move is over. We are moving one more time in the next couple months because we're house hunting. So that's a whole nother process. I'm gonna end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it and I'll see you all next week.